Barry, this is going to be the first time in 30 some odd years that we will have had an opportunity to sit down and have this kind of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the record, and for everybody else sitting there and listening, I'm going to ask you to identify yourself with your full name. What's your full name?
Middle name included?
Sure.
Sure. Barry Edward Finkelstein.
And you mentioned a moment ago that at some point in your life you had a nickname.
I probably still do.
You still do?
known as Mr. Fink or Fink.
Okay. Where did the Barry come from, and where did the Edward come from?
Barry came from my grandfather, because in Jewish religion you name after someone who had recently passed away, and my grandfather was named Barnett, and my name Barry was named after him. I have no idea where the Edward came from. So I never bothered to ask.
Was that your maternal grandfather?
That was Barnett was my paternal father. My father's father.
Now, your present family situation includes yourself and Arlene, your wife, who I've known for many years, and you are living where?
We live in Dix Hills, and we lived there for over 30 years already. 20 years, take it back, 25 years. 20 years in the same house, and 5 years previously in another house in the area.
So you didn't move too far from where you began, I guess, when you first got married?
When we first got married, we lived in an apartment for a year, and then we moved to Dix Hills, and we picked that area because of the school districts.
Now, there are 5 children in this marriage. Suppose you name each one of them, identify each one of them, and in birth order perhaps, and tell us a little bit about each one of them.
Okay, Nancy and Christy. Well, when I got married to Arlene, she already had 3 children. And the 2 oldest ones were Nancy and Christy, and they must be about 35 years old by now. Carrie is the middle one, and she's about 32. And then I have 2 by Arlene and me. That's Michelle and Stacy. Michelle is 25, 26, and Stacy's 24.
So they're all on their own at this point. They're all out in the world. And
yeah.
What are they doing, Barry? What?
Let's see. Christy is a school teacher, and she's married. Lives in Comac. Nancy is getting married, and she lives in the city. Kerry is married, and she lives in Forest Hills, and she has 2 children of her own. Michelle is on her own, living in Great Neck, and she's thinking about getting married sometime in the next couple of years, I would imagine. And Stacy is going to graduate school at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst.
Am I mistaken, or has it been you and 6 women living in the same house at certain points?
Yes, and it's always interesting. And well, when we built a new house, I put a hairdryer outlet in every room. I put telephone outlets in every room, and I watched to see that the toilet seat is always down. Because if it's always up, I've got troubles. It's interesting living with 6 women.
And what about the talents of the women, or the personalities?
Everyone is very different. Christy's a school teacher and very conscious. Even the twins, and Nancy is more outgoing. She used to work for Avon Corporation. I don't know where she works now at the moment. Kerry is very, very bright. Just didn't feel like finishing college and went her own way for a while. And now she's settling down with 2 kids, so she's in good shape. Michelle was a school teacher also in Brentwood, very bright, and she owns a gym. And very very conscious. And Stacy is a free spirit, and she's an art major up in the University of Massachusetts, and she does her own thing and lives her own life. Everyone is very different, none better or worse than the other, but they were all
self-sufficient in their own way.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, with a little luck, in the next 10 or 12 years, the youngest one will be able to earn a living for herself, and I'll be very happy. So I won't have to do quite so much supporting. But
Now,
all the others seem to be doing okay.
do you see any of the qualities that they maybe have picked up from their mother, or do you think that you're responsible for some of the talents or the abilities that you see among the girls?
I believe everybody's a combination of everything that has happened to them and does happen to them, and the life experiences, who their friends are, what their individual genes and makeup is, and so on. And to say that this one has this one from me and this from someone else, I can't go. I can't do that. But knock on wood, they will all be capable of earning a living, hopefully, and supporting themselves and be happy.
How about the grandchildren? How often, first of all, do you get a chance to visit?
We get to see the grandchildren, since it's mostly Kerry's and Keith's, once, twice a week usually.
Oh,
so it's fairly often.
Contact.
Yeah, a lot of contact.
Any qualities there that you see evolving, or?
Well, because of like Tyler, who's the oldest one, he's 4 years old, a very precocious kid. But that's partly because of his mother, who was very bright and taught him a lot and whatever. And his father's also a very bright guy. So bottom line is he's a very, very bright kid.
And Arlene's no slouch either.
No, not in the least.
With her energy level and her creativity and her
Arlene gets
spunk.
Yeah, Arlene has a lot to do with grandkids. She really, she's very happy to have the grandchildren. Matter of fact, they're the most important thing in her life.
Ah, that's a nice thing to say.
Yeah, which is good.
Where were you born, and when were you born, Barry?
I was born August 13th, 1942. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, what they call East New York. And I lived there until I was about 13 years old. Then we moved out to Levittown. Before
you moved to Levittown, what are some of the early memories that you retain from East New York? You went to school. You started school there.
Yeah, I went to school. The elementary school was right across the street. We lived in the house with my grandmother. Grandmother owned the house, so we had an apartment right next door to her. She, we weren't poor, but
was it a walk-up type house?
Or was it was two-story, semi-attached.
Oh,
so there was like 1, 2, 3, 4 apartments in each one. My grandmother didn't speak English. And my grandfather had died when I was about 3 years old or 2 years old, so I don't even, probably 2 years old. So I don't really have too much cognitive memories of him. But my grandmother pushed the push cart on Blake Avenue. So, it was an immigrant family, first generation. My parents worked hard. They did what they could, and we grew up. My kids have a lot easier.
Did you have any fantasies as a kid about what you were going to do or where you were going to be? Did you think about what if at all?
Oh, yeah. You always sit there and what if you were rich when you were looking down the stores and looking into things and you couldn't afford to buy them. Because I can remember when my father made $35 a week. And, while I was not, it was a livable wage and whatever, we weren't rich. But we had the TV set, one of the first 9-inch black and white RCA TV sets. We had the whole neighborhood in to watch because we were the first in the neighborhood. We had a car, which was also a rarity at the time. So they did some nice things. We had some good things, But by the same token, we weren't wealthy. And
this was all before the age of 13. You're talking about while you were in Brooklyn. What was the school you went to?
Let's see. The elementary school was 109. Which is a public school right across the street. And it was Strauss Junior High School, which I started, and then we had moved out.
Now, you alluded to your grandparents. Maybe you mentioned that they were immigrants. When did they come here, and where did they come from?
They all came from either Lithuania or Russia. My grandfather was, on my father's side, I believe, was working for I guess it was in the Soviet Army or whatever, Navy, and they commandeered a ship and they brought a whole shipload of people over in about 1915, 1912. No, it had to be earlier than that, probably around the turn of the century. And he brought a whole shipload of people with him. So that was one interesting thing. My grandmother, on my mother's side, she came from, who I was fairly close to, because she lived right next door, and we grew up with her. And
they met here? in this
They
country?
all met in this country, yes. They all met in this country because they were born in about the 1870s.
I'm
or
curious,
1860s.
your grandfather, was that a case of requesting asylum, or did he come through as an immigrant into...
I think he was in charge of giving passes and everything, so they gave passes to everyone, and he commandeered a ship, and they took a ship over.
Very
illegal?
enterprising.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sure it was very illegal.
Right.
But
Very
to get out of
enterprising.
Russia, that's what they did.
Yes, yes.
And my grandmother came from Lithuania, from... trying to think the name of the town. I don't think it was Riga, but it might be. And again, poor people came over, worked hard.
Do you have any ties with family there?
No. As a matter of fact, all records end. Because there are still a few brothers and sisters of my grandparents that we try to trace, and there's no way of tracing.
Not even with the internet? I mean.
No. One of the problems you run into is that they came over to avoid the pogroms from the Tsarist Russia. In the Tsar's period, and being Jewish, you were not high on the list. And a lot of people, to avoid the Tsar's armies and everything, had changed their names and moved to different villages and different towns. All contact, the village that my grandparents on my father's side were brought up on was burnt down to the ground. It was destroyed completely. Does not exist. And all those records, again, they were an outsider at that time.
Identities got erased.
Yes.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, the brothers and sisters changed names when they came here, and the family name.
How old then is your own family name now? Was it from that period, or?
Yeah, the name Finkelstein goes back all the way.
Oh, it does.
Yes.
Okay.
Matter of fact, we had done some tracing, and there was a Baroness von Finkelstein in the 1860s that there was a newspaper article, but since our family was not royalty, it would not be one of those. The other part of the family was Rabinowitz, and Rabinowitz's name changed to Robbins and changed to a couple of Roberts, a couple of other things. So the names were changed. And even my grandfather, from my mother's side, when he came over, when they went through immigration, the guy couldn't spell the name correctly according to the immigration papers, or whatever papers he did have. So the net result was the name came out like Ordansky in America, where it was probably something phonetically similar in Russian, but not the same.
But not the same. What kind of childhood memories of your mother do you have, Barry? You've got to have fond memories of your mother.
Yeah, being a little kid, and mother was, nice and everything, the same, this type of things. The only thing I do remember that was a problem was when my mother did go to work to supply some more income, my grandmother made lunch, or my mother made lunch for the day before, or whatever. So we either had bananas and sour cream for lunch, or we had lamb stew. To this day, I will never eat lamb stew, because I think I must have had it for 100 days in a row. So
your mother worked. Where did she work, or what did she do?
She was a clerk or a typist for a while, and then she ended up working, when we got older, she worked for the county clerk's office in Jamaica, Queens.
And, I didn't ask you about your dad, but what kind of work that he did?
Let's see, very early in the game, he was worked in a men's clothing line. Oh. He was a jack of all trades. He did cutting, he did shipping clerk work, he ran the shop.
Do you think this was something that came from family history or family heritage to some degree, to the garment industry? Was that something your grandparents had any influence? No.
Actually, my grandparents were very poor. I don't remember what my grandfather on my father's side did for a living. My grandfather on my mother's side, I know they pushed a push cart and they sold vegetables and stuff on Blake Avenue. I guess you went to work where you could get jobs, because my father's family comes from 11 kids, and everybody went to work to support the family, because they were
born in 42, so that was in the middle of the war.
Yeah, the war, my father worked for the Navy Yard, and he was a welder. And
the Brooklyn Navy Yard?
Brooklyn Navy Yard. And prior to that, I guess he did anything. After the war, my father worked in the men's shipping line until the place he worked for had gone out of business. He worked for Ripley Clothes, I guess, also. And he knew all the big shots for a while.
What did your mother like to do when she had any leisure time?
She was interested in her family.
Okay.
Everything was family.
Yeah.
And to this day, everything is still family. That's the only important thing. Her kids, her brothers and sisters, everything was family.
Was there a particular interest that your dad had, that your father had, that
Yeah, he liked to gamble.
he did?
Yeah, he liked the horses. He liked the crap tables. And not that he would bet very big, because he never did, but he liked the action. And he also liked playing the stock market, I guess, too. Little bits of money. They never had any money, so when you don't have any money, it limits a little bit what you do.
Exactly, sure. Was yours a big family, or is it? How many did you have siblings? Did you have brothers?
Yeah, I
and
have
sisters?
2 brothers, so it was 3 of us, and they're both younger than me.
And therefore, you had certain holidays that were important during the year where family got together, I assume?
All holidays.
Was there a favorite? Was there a big one?
Well, you had Passover, you had Hanukkah, you had all the Jewish holidays, and these were the important holidays.
Yeah.
When we grew up and got older, I had moved up to Boston, and one of the brothers moved. My parents had actually moved down to Florida, so things spread out, and then the holidays to get
More
together
difficult, yeah.
became more difficult.
Tell me about tell me about your brothers, and if you go with each one of them in
Okay,
birth
let's
order.
see. First one, who's about 2.5 years younger than me, is Arthur. He's a political consultant, and he does some campaign work for politicians, and he enjoys what he does very much. The youngest one, Ronnie, is about 10 years younger than me. He works with Arthur now. He runs the office while Arthur's out on the road, and they both have families, children. They're doing fine.
You're being very low-key when you speak of your brother Arthur. He's a rather famous person in some circles for the work
Yes,
that
in
he
some
has done.
circles. In some circles, not.
Some
Maybe
circles
infamous would be better than famous.
Well, is there anything that you think that growing up with the family that you did, is there anything in particular that you learned from your brothers, or you learned from some family member that you consciously refer back to that you implement or you use in your own life?
Yeah, a couple of major things. From my father, we learned ultimate honesty. My father was as honest a person as you'll ever meet in your life. A man who needed very little. I guess he most of the time had very little, but needed nothing else. Ultimate honesty. He would not cheat anybody out of anything. And basically the same thing goes with my brothers too. So we have learned honesty is an ultimate item. One thing my brother once said to me, don't put anything in writing that you can't afford to have printed on the front page of the New York Times.
Wow.
That's another rule that is good.
I was going to ask you to give us a picture, a word picture of family life from maybe age 10 to 20. And you from ages 10 to 20 years of age. What was family life like?
Family life was all home. Everything was home. Everything was revolved around home. Always had food to eat. Eating was important. Clothes was not important. Even though my father, when he worked in the clothing line, had gotten, great material, a funny story if you want, or a cute story. I would never had a pair of dungarees, because a pair of dungarees at that time must have cost $2 or $3. But I would have the finest wool worsted pants that could be made, because my father would get the material for nothing. They would cut it out at home, and he would sew it up in the shop. And I would have these $40, $50 pair of slacks at now would cost $300, $400. And I used to have to complain I want a pair of dungarees, because I was the only one wearing expensive English woolens, whereas the kids all had dungarees.
Yes.
So
yes,
that was important. Things.
Were there other adult influences outside of immediate family that played a large role in your formative years? Some individuals that you can think of?
Had a very successful uncle on my mother's side. He was her brother, and he played a large role, somewhat of a role. But basically, no, everything revolved around family. My father's family was also very honest, very low-key.
I'm always anxious to hear what influenced people's choice of career. Who influenced yours? Or how did you decide to teach?
I was an engineer first. I was always going to be an engineer, and I decided fairly young. I would imagine I was in junior high school when I decided I was going to become an engineer. I had a teacher who said, well, Finkelstein, can you work it out on a slide rule? So you make up a slide rule to work out things. But basically, I went through and I became an engineer. I was an engineer for 5 years or so before I went into teaching. And the company I was working for went out of business. And at that point, I wasn't too unhappy because I had already priced a one-way ticket to Tahiti, because maybe engineering, the pressure and everything else was a little bit much. The people who I was dealing with, and I was moving up fairly rapidly in engineering. I was a second to chief engineer in the company by the time I left, and I would have been a chief engineer a year later in another company. So,
what kind of engineering were we talking?
It was electrical engineering, primarily microwave devices, microwave things, radar antennas. The people who were, quote, successful in the field. One guy who was successful, who I dealt a lot with, a CEO of a company, hadn't talking with any of his kids for the last 10 years. He had a beautiful house. He had a 40-foot boat in Huntington Harbor. And the man was, worth millions, but hadn't talked with his wife. All his kids had run away from home. This was success. Another one was successful, and he had a heart attack by the time he was 40, a nervous breakdown at 45. Again, another success. They measured success primarily in the basic units of money and what other people have done, essentially. I didn't want that. When we got married, I decided that I would rather be with my family, have a little less money. I said, money I can always make. And basically, I wanted to spend time with my family. I said, that's being a success. So I won't have all the toys or more expensive toys that you get with more money. I was coming home from a party. The company I worked for went out of business. So I was coming home from a party about 3 in the morning. It's about 6 weeks after the place had closed down. And the guy was talking and saying to you, what would you do if someone told you only had 6 months to live? And you get rid of all the trite statements, travel around the world, find some girls if you're a guy, and vice versa if you're a girl. And I said, I'd like to leave a part of me with somebody else. And then the question came up, why wait until you have 6 months to live to do what you would like to do? So the next day I applied for teaching positions. And that's how I ended up in Brentwood.
So interestingly enough, then, you already had a degree, but you had not prepared for a teaching career, so therefore you had no ed courses or anything in the bag at
No,
this
I actually had 2 degrees, plus half an MBA.
You had 2 degrees?
I had a master's degree, bachelor's and master's degrees in engineering, plus I was halfway through an MBA in finance.
And with all that education, you didn't yet have any education courses,
No.
And you decided to teach, and you saw opportunities. And at that time, there were a lot of opportunities to teach.
Yeah, I called up like 15 school districts and asked for applications. Brentwood said, come on down. I came down, filled it out. They hired me almost on the spot.
For a great deal less than you had been making.
Yes. As a matter of fact, my first paycheck, when I looked at it from Brentwood, and this was after I even gotten a raise, I asked them, was this for 1 week or 2? And they said for 2. And I shook my head and walked away and said, I used to make more than this in 1. Mm. And that was the truth.
Yeah.
So, but at that time I was able to, all I needed to get was 12 credits in ed. You could have a lot of other things waived for a year's period of time. Like I didn't have to do student teaching and whatever. Mm-hmm. So at that time I took my interviews in March. I was going to take the ed courses in the summer. And they said, well, you don't have any ed courses. I said, no, but I will get them in the summer. They said, well, how do we know that? I said, I'm telling you. You don't have student teaching. I said, no, and I won't. I said, but that can be waived. Mm-hmm. And they took a chance. They hired me.
There was a large turnover during those years, too. A lot of people came, they spent a few years here, and then they moved on.
Brentwood was not the highest ranked school district on Long Island. It still isn't. But the turnover here was about 20%, 25% a year. But there are other school districts that were hiring, too.
I want to go back and ask you a few things, and then we'll come back to your early experience here in the district. Do you have any contact with any of the guys or girls that you went to school with in an earlier time of your life?
Yes.
You do?
Mostly from college, not from high school. None from high school, none from elementary school.
Where did you go to college, by the way?
I went to college. I have a bachelor's degree from CCNY in electrical engineering. I have a master's degree from Northeastern University up in Massachusetts. And I have half an MBA at Hofstra. And I have small courses, LIU, and so on.
But you maintain contact with some of your college chums. Did you live, well, I guess up in Massachusetts, you had to live there and work up there. So you developed an independent life while you were in school. That's neat. I'm curious about, in your growing up, as one of with brothers and other siblings, did you have responsibilities that you were assigned to take care of? Did you have some chores that you were supposed to do, or was it something that was divided and people did what they had to do?
There was no set thing. It wasn't like, I had to take the garbage out, or you had to do this, or you had to do that.
Everybody chipped in.
Everyone did what you had to do.
Do you remember your first paying job?
Yes, my first paying job was delivering some stuff for a fruit stand around the corner from our house. I think I made a quarter an hour, give or take a couple of pennies. My other job, which was somewhere around the same time, was running sodas for the guys on Saturday and Sunday morning who used to play stickball in the schoolyard. And sometimes they would throw you a nickel, sometimes you just get the deposit on the bottle, and you'd make $1 or $2 that way.
Yeah.
And $1 or $2 at that time was nice.
Yeah, if you were enterprising, and you weren't afraid of running and doing what had to be done in order to make it. What were you interested in, Barry? What did you like to do? Did you read? Were you into sports or cars or growing up?
I don't know. What was I interested in?
Did you like making things? Did you like working with your hands?
I like playing around with things and taking things apart and so on. But that's the engineering portion of me.
Sure.
I read everything. Did a lot of reading. Did even some TV watching, but there wasn't very much on television at that time.
What kind of reading did you particularly enjoy?
I read science fiction magazines and novels. I read, we used to go to the library once a week and get out like 8-10 books or something. Factual things, anthropology, archaeology, a lot of stuff like that.
Is that something you still enjoy doing?
Oh, immensely.
Yeah. Now you have more time to do it.
Now I have more time.
Yes, you can pick and choose.
Yeah.
The period of time that you and I grew up in, the world changed dramatically. We're now at the end of the millennium, and we look back, we'll probably be reviewing 1,000 years, let alone the last 100 years. But there were some very significant historical events that occurred during our lifetime. Are there a couple that come to mind that you can mention your memories associated with them?
Yeah, well, the first classic one is the assassination of John F. K. I was in City College. We were sitting in the lunchroom, a bunch of us just sitting around talking, and someone came running downstairs saying the president's been shot. And we said, oh yeah, didn't you know about, big joke type of thing. And then I said, no, it's serious. So we ran upstairs. Remember, City College is in the middle of Harlem, which is sometimes not the best neighborhood in the world. But we ran upstairs, and there were a couple of cars pulled over and listened to car radios and the accounts. We get on, walk up the street, find someone's house that's open, walk inside. These perfect strangers, and stand by the television and listen to the reports. And people were crying, very, very moving. Yeah, never forget that day.
That was an event that changed many lives from that moment on. The world was never quite the same again. The filter had changed the way we saw things.
Yeah. You had to be either a fan of John F. K. or not a fan of John F. K. But bottom line was, it was something that happened in America, assassination that does not occur.
Yes.
And this is the type of thing. Friends and I, at that evening, we drove down to Washington, and we got online to wait in the rotunda. And the line was like 20 blocks long, 6 people deep. And the cops were saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, please stand on the sidewalk." We got in online before midnight. We got through the rotunda. It had just broken dawn. I still even have some photographs from inside the rotunda of John F. Kennedy's casket laying in state. Yeah, it was a major event.
Well, let's let me ask you a very different question. Are you a morning person or a night person?
Morning.
You mentioned you get up as you did when you taught.
More or less. I'm up at 6:30, 7, and.
But you have the latitude now as to whether or not you jump back in.
Yeah, well,
get a few
it
more.
helps sometimes. It doesn't, you don't do it. I don't do it often, but
Yes.
This morning, for example, I went back for a couple of hours.
Is there a favorite season that you have? Favorite season?
Yeah, I like the warm weather. Warmer rather than cold. I like to work outside. I like to work in the yard.
Do you?
Yes.
You have pretty much given us a picture of the schools that you attended from the first elementary school. By the way, did you start in kindergarten? Is that where school began?
Yes. I actually started probably nursery school.
Did it?
Nursery school in Brownsville, New York, which is not the nicest neighborhood at the time. I guess there I learned a lot of things.
Yeah. And you've mentioned all the way up through graduate school. You had a lot of teachers in those years, and I'm just wondering if there is a particular teacher that, if you could, you would like to thank for something that you never specifically thanked them for.
Yes, well, there's a teacher who's probably, I believe his name is Dr. Erath at this point, if he's still even alive. He was, I believe, either principal or superintendent of Levittown schools. I guess I was in the 9th grade, probably 9th grade. And first time I had come close to making the honor roll, and I needed like 2 points, and I had a 90 average or something like that. And he gave me the 2 points in geometry. I guess it was 10th grade. And he said, "You can do a lot better than that." And just a couple of words from him, a couple of comments from him, made a big difference, because after that, my grades had gone up considerably.
Wow.
So one person did make a difference.
Yes.
Which is one of the reasons I went into teaching, because one person can make a difference.
Was there one teacher among all of your teachers, other than the person who you just mentioned, that was an influential role model? Sounds like that had a profound effect upon you. And
yeah, he was the major one at the time. Yeah, there were some teachers who, again, you click off with and you hit right with. But at that point, everything was already gelled. So,
what was your least favorite subject when you were a student?
French. Language is a hard thing with me. I have difficulty. My standard joke is English is my second language. No one knows what my first one is. So I have trouble with language, and I can't spell. When I took the aptitude test at City College, they did an aptitude test to find out where to place people and so on. In abstract and spatial reasoning, I scored in the 98th percentile was the highest number they had. So I scored in the 98th percentile. In spelling, I scored in the 02 percentile. So I went the whole range from top of the top to the bottom of the bottom in the same group.
We were talking a little bit about Brentwood before we started talking, and let's swing back to that. When you decided to apply for a teaching position and you found Brentwood, or Brentwood found you, I don't know exactly how that happened, but you applied in Brentwood. What year would that have been?
Excuse me?
What year would that have been?
That would have to be, It was 28 years here. I retired in 1999, so 29 years. 1970, I would imagine.
Ah, okay. And was it because Brentwood offered you something that other districts didn't, or that you saw something in Brentwood that you didn't?
No, actually, I was looking for a job in teaching, and they offered me a job.
Okay.
They were the first ones, and that's
all it took. Okay.
And I said, okay, we're done.
Did you have any prior knowledge of Brentwood as a community, or did its reputation precede you?
No, actually, I learned more about Brentwood after I had accepted the job and whatever. And when I was taking an ed course, and one guy said, where are you going to be teaching? And I said, in Brentwood. And he goes, And he was the professor. I said, no, it's not.
Was this at Hofstra at this point?
No, that was at LIU.
That was at LIU, okay, yeah. I'm asking because in the earlier years, Brentwood and Hofstra had some kind of partnership through the Ford Foundation grant that was operative here, so I wondered.
I am unaware of that.
Who interviewed you, Barry?
The math department chairman's name was Bill Gates at the time. He interviewed me.
Not the Bill Gates, but Bill Gates.
Bill Gates. Bill Gates, was it? No, George Gates.
George Gates.
George
Okay.
Gates.
Okay.
I'm getting confused. Not Bill Gates. It was George Gates.
Okay. Yes, now I remember. Now it comes back to me. Yes.
And there was someone named Edwards or something here. Was here. And I spoke with them, and their question was, well, what happens if you get a better offer? Since this job doesn't pay very much, you get a better offer. I said, I'm going to teach. That's what I'm going to do. As a matter of fact, I did get a better offer about 2 weeks before school started. I was going to make around $9,000, $9,500 here, and I was offered a job for $30,000. Big choice, but again,
but not in teaching, though.
Not in teaching, no.
Okay. So that was a choice that wasn't really a choice for you at that point.
The money made it interesting.
Oh, really?
It was tempting. You're talking 3 times the salary.
Sure.
So I had to go. I went away for a weekend camping and made a decision, and then gave up the money.
Did you have? Well, I'm not going to ask you about the specific interview unless you remember something from that interview. Your first impressions of Brentwood then came during the first year and meeting people here and meeting students here. In those early encounters, what kind of impression did you come away with? What were your early impressions of Brentwood?
Yeah.
Really what I mean.
Again, it was a different community than it is today. I believe it was about 65% white at that time, 10% Spanish, maybe 15% Spanish, and maybe 20-25% black, probably 20%. And the difference was, I was dealing with primarily slower ability kids, but they cared and they worked, and there was a lot of respect. And granted, a lot of them weren't going to be lawyers or doctors. Some were, and some did. They were good, hard-working students, and it was fun. I enjoyed it immensely. People I worked with were excellent. They were very nice people, and I had no problems. It was, I found Brentwood fine. In other words, I had no trouble at all at the beginning.
So, in spite of the fact that you weren't really academically prepared with ed courses or teacher training, student teaching, all the rest, which was waived, you had a good experience your first couple of years, and you did how they say OJT, on the job training, more or less.
Yeah, well, a couple of things occurred. I knew my material very well. I was going to come in and I was going to make everybody fundamentally understand mathematics as easily as I do. And because it all is very simple. There's no difficulty whatsoever. You just do this and this and this and this. My first set of lesson plans, I planned to go over this stuff in like 5 days. Well, we covered it in about 40 minutes because they knew a lot more than I had assumed, because I was going to go start from the beginning, work my way right through it, step by step, very carefully. So that was all modified and changed. It took about 30 days to realize that I could not teach everybody mathematics as fundamentally as I understand it.
You're a fast learner.
And after 30 days, you start doing the best you can You try to get as much across. You teach things one way. If it doesn't work for everybody, you then go for a second or third or fourth ways. And sometimes you go for as many as 15 or 20 different ways. Some people, unfortunately, will never get it or don't get it, you know, whatever. As a teaching, personality-wise, you know, if you have the personality, you can manage.
Yes.
If you don't have the personality to be a teacher, then all your lead courses are not going to do anything.
Did you always teach the same subject matter, or in other words, I'm asking here about assignments or certifications? Or
I always taught math. I refused to teach anything else. I taught and started the computer programming department here. I guess when the first courses came out, I taught the first courses. I also taught an in-service course to teach other teachers how to do it. I guess Bob Wilcox also did it in the Soundly building about the same time. But I taught the first computer courses because I was the only one. So when computers
first appeared,
I was the only one who was able to do it. I was the only one who had ever worked with computers and knew the languages. So
what languages are we talking about?
The computer languages, BASIC, and I also taught Fortran.
Okay.
We didn't get far enough into COBOL because we weren't set up to do that. And but I taught everything from counting up to calculus.
So you mentioned a weakness with spelling was concerned, but in languages you were a whiz-bang where it came to mathematics and...
yeah, because computer languages are not the same as spelling.
No. But they are a language, though.
It's a language, yes. And I even passed French in high school by memorizing 300 pages, you know, of a book. You know, you can actually do things like that, but that's not learning anything.
Did you teach all grades, 10th through 12th?
Yes.
You mentioned the department chairman, George Gates. Who else was in the department back in those days that you work with?
Let's see. When I first came in, I guess Ray Newcomb was there. I'm trying to think of who actually was there at the time.
Yeah, we've seen...
Gabe Gengler was there. He was whatever. A guy by the name of Claude Frank for a couple of years. Yes. He was my mentor for the first couple of years in the math department. There was Getch. Mrs. Getch, I'm trying to remember her first name. I don't. She was a very loud individual.
You also became active in other respects too. Did you, besides the computer program which you began, or I guess which has evolved after your initial efforts, were you involved with sponsoring various student activities or working with kids outside the classroom?
Yeah, after the first year, I guess I was the advisor to the math league team. And I did that for about 7, 8, 9 years until I asked to be paid the lowest amount of anyone in Suffolk County. And they said no, so I said no.
I don't understand. Why did you do that?
Well, because it was taking up a lot of time. And I figured at least I should get, I think it was $150 a year or something like that, whatever it was, to be the advisor and coach. And that was the lowest of anybody being paid in Suffolk County. And they didn't agree, so. But shortly after that, it died because no one else wanted to do it, and no one else did it the way I did it.
I understand. Okay.
Yeah, we got involved with some other things. We got involved with a academic bowl. That's actually where I met Arlene, and that was taking 5 of our kids and competing against other school districts.
Now that's still something that continues to this day.
Yeah, it's done under different names,
different form. Terry Cousins
does it basically now. But we...
and so that's how you met Arlene. She was working with that program at the same time.
Yeah.
Did you, of all of the years of service, which incidentally were how many? What was the total number?
28 years.
28 years,
I believe.
Did you have a favorite year, Barry? Or a group of years that were the best of times for you?
Best of times. No, I don't pick out any one year.
Okay. Here's a question that I know you'll have an answer for. You had a job description, no matter what it was that you were teaching or what it was that you were doing. But you also had a reason that transcended any job description. And I'm wondering if you could put into words how you saw your purpose for all of the time and effort that you've put into working with students.
All right, my purpose was really, in my life, there was one or two teachers who made a significant impact. If I could do that with one or two or three kids a year, that would be my contribution and my goals. And basically everything I did was to help the students do better, learn more, be all they can be, and to give them a head start so that they could achieve whatever goals that they had for their lives. If it took some extra time, it took extra time.
Yes. Very often teachers don't get the kind of feedback that let them know whether or not they've been successful or not. And I'm curious as to whether or not you've ever had any students come back and tell you something that made you feel good.
Yes, I've had lots. And everything from doctors, lawyers, engineers, actually somebody who is, I guess, now working for Eastman Kodak, or probably one of the chief engineers. Yes, we have had lots of feedback from people who say, yes, it is you. Matter of fact, I had there was a movie out where someone had made a difference in someone's life as a teacher. And I get a call from, I guess it was from Rochester, where the guy who is now chief engineer, one of the chief engineers in Eastman Kodak, calls up and said, I saw the movie. He says, and here I am, a 45-year-old man, calling the teacher who made a difference to me.
What a great thing.
Yeah.
What a great story.
Kid's name was Bill Baum.
What a great story.
Yeah, I should call him Dr. Baum by now.
Really?
But
do you have any contact with people now? I mean, outside of the phone calls that come in, do you, on a regular basis, do you keep in touch with them?
With some. We keep some with some. We have some disappointments, but we have mostly honest, good, hard-working kids. One of my favorite stories is one of the kids that came out of one of my slowest of all possible classes and got a job in the city working in the sheet metal union. And he had come back like 2 years after he had graduated to talk and thank me. Why he thanked me, I don't know. He said, because of you, this is what I'm doing. And he was making, like at that time, about $35 an hour, which was twice or more than I was making. But he said, you taught me how to work hard, do the work, and whatever. And this is good.
It's about a lot more than mathematics or English.
Oh, it's about life.
Yeah.
I've had classes where I taught them how to be human, how to walk down the hall without punching somebody, how to sit next to one another, how not to call someone else a name, how to say that, if you think you're perfect, you don't make fun of someone else who is different. Because when you look in the mirror, guys, we're all different. There's a lot more than just mathematics.
Barry, what makes you angry? You're always so even-tempered, calm, from an outsider's point of view.
Actually, I'm not. I get very annoyed, very angry.
What does it?
What
pushes that button?
People who don't try, people who are wasting time and ripping off the system, whatever, be it teachers, doctors, lawyers, politicians, whatever. People aren't doing their job.
Do you have a favorite comedian? Somebody who makes you laugh? Huh?
Well, a lot of them make me laugh.
Yes.
But offhand, no.
Okay. Early on, you also became involved professionally, and I know at one point, we were talking about it briefly before, you became a negotiator for the teachers, and you negotiated some of the early contracts. How were you at that point a member of BTA, or were you not a member of the BTA?
Yeah, when I first joined, everyone becomes a member.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a member of the BTA. My first year teaching, I guess Tom Brush, who used to be a member of your department, John,
yes,
comes over to me and says about halfway through the year, we need someone on negotiating who knows numbers.
Now, there's a legend, by the way. We could talk about Tom for a long time.
For a long time, yeah. But you'd have more than a couple of hours worth of tape. But not today. But so Tom asked me if I would do it, and I said yes. And when, at that time, even with the tenure laws, whatever, I could be fired for any reason. Matter of fact, when I sat down, they introduced me across the table, and they said, you don't have tenure and whatever, you could be fired. I said, well, if you want to fire me for what we do across the table, be my guest, I'll get a job tomorrow. I said, I hope if I'm going to be fired, you would fire me for what I do in my classroom with the kids and not for this. And P.S. I wasn't fired. Became very good friends with Mr. DiPietro guy, and we got along very well.
But you actually negotiated a contract.
I helped.
You helped, and you didn't have tenure at the time.
No, it was first year.
Incredible story.
But I would have gotten a job next week.
Yes.
See, I don't really, It didn't make any difference to me. If they fired me, they weren't punishing me. I would have had another job a week later. And I had enough money, so that was not a problem.
So not alone did you get some recognition for your professional efforts at that time, you also made some influential friends along the way.
Yes, which probably have bailed my ass out a lot, because I used to have a sign at my desk when I was an engineer saying, "Keep mouth shut," and I still haven't learned when to keep my mouth shut. Slow learner.
Oh, I don't know about that. So you were actively participating, actively involved at that point. Then your participation changed, I guess, somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere about 5 years later or so.
Can I ask you what happened or what that was about?
Oh, well, one contract that we negotiated, I went to sleep and, I went to sleep and the next morning it was signed. It was negotiated. You don't need me. One contract, I guess the last one that I did, was I was at home and told to come in and sign it. That's not what's supposed to be. At which point I said, "You don't need me." Mm-hmm. And actually, one time we were, on part of the negotiating team, we were actually accused of selling out the teachers. At which point I made a very loud couple of statements and whatever, and when the executive council meetings, and a couple of guys had to carry me out, ranting.
Yes.
Bottom line is, if you want,
Were you at that point venting to the people who were criticizing a decision, or were you upset
No, the contractors were very good. With the process.
With the process.
The process itself. The contract that were negotiated were all relatively fair and good, about as good as we were going to get.
Yes.
Whether it was actively done or passively done or whatever. To be accused of selling people out is whatever. Say it to my face if you think that's true. Okay. I will defend myself because I don't do that. By the same token, I gave them the opportunity to vote down the contract. If you didn't like it, vote it down. And a lot of people were too mealy-mouthed to do anything. Mm-hmm. They would okay anything.
But you lost your taste for
yeah, basically because we became an old boys club, and sabbaticals were suddenly given to those people who just happened to be union members, active union
while
members.
there were still sabbaticals to grant.
Sabbaticals,
right?
Until we got
that became a giveaway.
Yeah, well, it was like a payoff type of thing, when you start playing that game. At which point I, said I don't want to be part of the union anymore.
So who was the last BTA president that you worked with or under? It was with Jack. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Was it Jack? Yeah, because I was probably suing the union when Les was president. Yeah, it was Jack.
I beg your pardon? You went after the union when?
Yeah, well, because under the laws of agency fee, they were allowed to take out dues, but they weren't allowed to take out dues used for political purposes. So I got in touch with the Right to Work organization, and we sued the union.
Okay, all right. You made an issue of it.
Yes.
Because it was unjust, what you're saying. Okay, bottom line.
Yeah.
And that fits within the character and person of the interviewee right here. Mm-hmm. Yes, I can understand that. Would you say that was one of the most important political struggles that you have ever been involved in the district here? After that, you kind of step back?
Yeah, basically. We were able to do some things on the district level, which were nice. Mm-hmm. On the high school and other levels, it was not that important.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's ironic because there are some people who think when you enter the ivory tower, you leave politics behind, and politics doesn't exist in education.
Well, the politics in teaching is childish. I was involved in some politics over at engineering companies, which was a lot more sophisticated. This stuff is
and interestingly enough, you also have your brother who has made a career of knowing his stuff in terms of political, his political acumen. Put it that way. Mm-hmm. You have to have benefited somewhat from those years of experience too.
Well, my brother and I are different in a lot of ways, and he's more passionate about some things, and I'm
Okay.
more passionate about other things. But the bottom line is, yeah, we are reasonably astute in what we're doing.
Has your opinion of unionism changed then over the years, Barry, as you've watched? Well, we've watched the struggle for most of our life in terms of the numbers of people that have been attracted to or not attracted to the union movement. And we were both in Brentwood when it became a union. It had
yes, I even voted for it to become a union. With the with the other problems that exist.
Right.
You need an organization to protect the rights of the teachers, because based on the atmosphere of them against us type of situation that exists with administration, some people in administration, that you need protection for the ordinary person who is not capable of protecting himself as well. So you need a union of some sort to protect the rights. But is the union perfect? No, the union's not perfect.
There are some who would say that part of the problem is that it's no longer adversarial, and it needs to be adversarial.
No, it's still adversarial.
There are some who would say there is far more compromising going on, and that's why Brentwood has had the successes that they've had, because we've never had a strike. We've never reached a point where it has broken
We've never
down.
had a strike, true. And there are contract negotiations or whatever, contractual things that are compromises and have worked out fine. But there is still a very large, them and us, to a hierarchy of administrators versus teachers. And the administrators, some of them are pompous.
I wonder if that's because at bottom it's a business and it's about money. And it's about
That's not it, it's power. It's strictly a power play, because if you can't say no, if you can't push around people, you don't have any power. It is a sad thing. My own opinion of unions, you don't need it. In general, if you have an enlightened environment, whatever, where people are respectful of everyone else.
Yes.
The concept, unfortunately, is still them against us, and it's a terrible thing, and it shows up, unfortunately.
Did you have heroes growing up? I'm going to switch gears here and
Did I
take
have
you
heroes?
back.
No.
Didn't have
No, it
somebody
wasn't.
who you admired,
Well, you admire some people, yes,
but not as a hero.
but not as a hero.
Okay.
I would like to live my life like they did. No.
Yeah, okay. Were you ever afraid to come to work in Brentwood?
No.
Looking back, are there any things that, and you've had a chance to look over their career and say, geez, I regret this, thus, and so I wish I had been able to accomplish this, or I wish I had done this differently. Have you ever done that?
You do that often. You should do that probably once a week or more. But the bottom line is, you do what you do at the time. It is the right thing at the time, hopefully. Hopefully you didn't do it with malice. You didn't hurt anybody in the process. You didn't try to step on somebody to get to the next step. No, I don't regret an awful lot. In other words, for example, I have never applied to be an administrator. I never wanted to be an administrator. I'm sure I have enough credits to do that, but it's not important. That was not my job. I didn't want to be that. I would have liked to have been something in Central, possibly. But again, if I couldn't accomplish the things that I wanted to do to help the kids, what am I doing?
Yeah. Was there anything that you could look at and say that over and above other things that you've accomplished, you were really going to give yourself the pleasure of feeling some pride for having accomplished this? Is there something you're very proud of?
Yeah. I have a Teacher of the Year award. I have a couple of other little things that the kids have given me. I have a couple of letters from kids. And that's the only reasons. Those are the important items.
What was the day that you actually retired, or what was the time of your retirement? We've just come from you retired less than a year ago, so
I made the final decision, put the papers in like the 24th of June.
That was very last minute.
Yes, very last minute.
What accounted for that ambivalence?
I had probably made the decision just about the earlier part of June, and it just, a big decision to make, a big step to take.
And so it was, it appeared from the outside that this was something that you must have gone back and forth, and then finally decided yes.
Yeah, well, for the last year or so, last year actually, it was no longer that much fun. I wasn't enjoying it anymore. Not that my classes were so terrible. I actually had 4 very good classes, and one class after they got rid of half the kids, half the kids stopped coming. It was an excellent class also. But I wasn't enjoying it anymore. And things were changing. The administration was not responsive, was not doing things that they should be doing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I understand.
So I just, made a thing and said, I'm going to do it. And I just did it.
Did it feel any different once the decision was made, the papers were in? Did you feel a certain relief having made the decision?
Yeah, because up until you put the papers in, you can still always change your mind. Once I said I was going to do it, then the papers were put in, then it was a final thing. It didn't feel any different until, I guess, the 7th or 8th of September when Arlene had to go back to work.
Yes.
And I was...
Have you had any days of regret, or at least wishing that maybe you hadn't done it, or missing certain things?
Well, I miss the people who I worked with. That is important.
Yes.
And that's the only relatively important thing. Other than that, it was enough.
Yeah, it was a good decision.
Good decision, fine.
But you also mentioned that you still maintain contacts with a lot of your colleagues who you were also friendly with.
Yes. Yeah, so I know what's going on.
Yeah.
So you always, actually some of the things that I hear about, I'm not overly happy with, and I'm glad I'm not here to have to listen to it or put up with it.
Did you ever, while you were working, Barry, and because of the salary we were paid for so many of those early years, did you ever have second jobs?
I did a couple of jobs for my brothers. When I went into teaching, I wanted the time to spend with my kids. Both jobs I took with my brothers for the summers, one turned out to be somewhat of not what I wanted to do. For example, one job I actually did the outside painting of of one of his houses, and I took the whole summer, and I was making a lot of money. And I was sitting there going, my kids came up to swim in the pool one day, and Arlene, and I'm sitting there going, why am I doing this? I said, just for some money? When I wasn't with my family because I was working. And at which point I then used that money to build a pool for my kids at home. But that was about the last job I ever took. No, I never worked during the summer.
Okay.
Summer was for spending with my family.
Because you keep referring to going back and looking at your basic priorities and your original reason for coming to the classroom or wherever possible. You stayed right on the mark. You tried very hard to stay right true to your own values and your own priorities.
Yeah, well, one of my daughters once said to me, why don't you go back to engineering? You can make a lot more money. I said, yes, I could. I said, the only thing that will happen is we'll have a more expensive car. And I'll be working until 7, 8 o'clock every night and doing the same garbage that I was doing before.
Yes.
I said, is that the only important thing? And her thing is, yeah, we could have a brand new car. I said, no, it's not the only important thing.
Did you have a favorite time of the school year, Barry? When you were active, when you were working?
Yeah, I always liked the beginnings. I always liked the ends. And some years I liked the whole year through.
Yeah.
Some years,
Was there a favorite part of the journey? Or a least favorite part of the journey?
Well, there were some years that I would have quit on any given day.
Yeah.
You go through that, whatever. That was probably about 8, 9 years before I retired.
And it passes.
It passed.
Yes.
Yeah. Then I was going to actually retire a little earlier, and it was very good. I was having a great time, and the kids were great, and everything was good. And then last year wasn't so good. I said enough.
I didn't ask you this before, and I should ask you to define for me what, if you were not, after you became, I will say, disenchanted with the process, and you stopped being involved actively with the BTA, you had another status that you mentioned to me, and I never understood that. What you said you were something about an agent. What were you referring to? You're an independent.
Oh no, the agency fee.
Agency. What does that mean?
Oh, that means that you're not a union member, but you pay union dues.
Okay, you're not a union.
In other
member,
words, I never signed a paper saying I was a BTA member after I dropped out.
Okay.
So while I get all the benefits,
because you're still paying dues into the organization.
Into the organization, I am not.
But you made that's a statement, though. That you
I refuse
based
to join.
on who you are and who you have been. Okay.
Yeah.
Consistent. Do you know if there were other people in the district who also, like you, felt strongly enough to take that position?
There were about 8 or 10 at the time that I started it. There are probably about 2 or 3 left.
Mm. It represents an historical moment in time for the district and for the organization, it seems to me. That's why it was really important for me to talk with you, too, about the big picture. The big picture is the one that we ought to be looking at.
Yeah. No, but the union has done essentially a thing. There was a period of time when I actually debated about going about either taking over the union or destroying it. And I did not want to run a union myself. And I did not see anything that would replace it as being any better than what was there. Mm-hmm. At which point I just dropped that whole idea. Mm-hmm. Because at that point in time, I did have some resources available that I could have used to done some work, and I didn't want to do that.
Okay.
At which point I said, they will survive, they will do. Mm-hmm. And they are better than nothing, and they are doing what they have to do.
Okay.
And I didn't want to do it, and I didn't think I could do any better.
I'm going to, again, there's no way to segue from what we're talking about into this, but I'm just going to ask the question flat out. One of the many books that you've read over the course of your lifetime that really moved you, that made a very strong impact on you. I don't know what that book might have been, but you are a reader and a voracious one, I gather. So there must have been some book somewhere along the line that you just went gaga over.
Yeah, probably Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged.
Ah, yes, yes.
But that also set my brother off, so it did set me off quite a bit.
What, besides the people, and I guess that might be the answer to the question about what you miss most, is there anything else that you miss about?
Yeah, well, like my brother once said to me a couple of weeks ago, my youngest brother, when we were talking about earning money and what I'm doing and whatever. And the comment was, when I was teaching, at least I was helping some people and doing something to earn money. And now whatever I'm doing just strictly for greed. Just for the sake of earning money.
However, I would add to that, there is something that you're getting out of this. You're having fun, so you're doing it for you.
Yeah, but there's no other social...
I understand.
External redeeming value for what I'm doing.
Okay.
What I'm doing now is I collect a pension, so that's money that helps me. I'm doing some other little things that I don't think help anybody in the whole world but me.
You want to talk about those other little things, or would you rather not? What are you doing?
I play a little bit on the stock market on the computer, what they call day trading type of thing, but not day trading, more like a couple of day trading. Mm-hmm. And knock on wood, so far I've done reasonably well.
Excellent.
And but again, does it help anybody else? Not in the least.
Well, if it's fun and it's not hurting anybody, and after all, you have worked very hard for a lot of years, you deserve some kickback time.
Oh yeah. Oh, I enjoy doing it.
Yes.
That's why I do it.
Sure. Do you have any plans about that? Yes, you do. You're planning to go to Arizona. You
yeah. Well, we will be doing a lot more traveling.
Does Arlene plan to stick with what she's doing in the long?
As of now.
As of now.
As of now.
Okay, so there's no short-term plan to both of you take off and pursue the rainbow, or in the meantime, you have some plans to travel, but you didn't say where you'd like to travel to.
Well, we've been to a lot of places already. We've, I've covered Europe. I've covered North Africa. We've been to the Far East. We'll eventually get to a few other places that I'm still missing.
But you'll do that on summer vacations, I take it.
Well, right now on summer
Yes.
vacations when Arlene's not working.
Right.
Or if she ever retires or when she retires, a book around the world trip.
Neat.
Find someone to take care of my cats, my house.
Is there something that you could offer to the? We were talking about the young people who have replaced us in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of advice, if anything, could you possibly offer to somebody who is just beginning a career?
Okay. The major difference between people who are just beginning and me at this point is that I had lost some of the enthusiasm that we had when we started. They still have the enthusiasm, whatever. Basically, I tell them, and I've told them before, reach the ones you can reach, and don't worry about the ones you can't reach because you're not going to be able to do anything about it. And give everybody a fair shot. And if you can do that with your enthusiasm that you still have, you will do fine.
Do you have any interest in using some of the skills and some of the information and the wisdom that you've accumulated over the years and sharing it with other people at this point? I'm not asking if you want to teach again in a material or in a financial, remunerative way, but I'm talking about sharing what you have.
Anything that does not become, quote, a job. I will not, for example...
What would be fun for you, Barry, to do now, to teach or to offer to somebody else, to instruct or...
For what my knowledge and information would be of use, which I'm not sure it will be at all that much use, because everybody learns for themselves in their own way and their own thing. You got to be yourself. That's a good remark. That's what when I took an ed course, the one thing that actually came out of those courses that I did take was be yourself. What works for you works for you. What works for the other person may not work for you. Be yourself. You'll find the things that work for you. So those are the only things. Yeah, in a small setting group, if people want to sit and talk or whatever, I'd be very happy to join in.
Okay, I just want, because you mentioned some things that are giving you, that you're having fun with right now. And I wondered about some other people who might not have to do some of those things that would be willing and able to learn what you had to offer if that was something that you had to do.
You need the right personality and right everything.
Yes.
Some of the things I'm doing are very risky with a lot of money involved. If you can sleep at night, that's one thing.
Okay.
If you can't sleep at night, it's not for you.
5 years from now, God willing that we are all in good health and continuing to enjoy life as it is, do you see something in the foggy, distant future that you would like to accomplish or to achieve? Yeah,
actually, it's going to sound very materialistic, but yes, I will put together a large sum of money.
In the next 5 years? And that sounds like a wonderful plan to me.
Yeah, and then this way I'll probably make my kids financially independent at the same time. But other than that, where I live, hey, there's airports everywhere.
You could not have accomplished this goal of yours if you were still teaching in the classroom every day.
I wouldn't have the time to do what I'm doing.
You wouldn't have the time. It sounds like a wonderful mountain to climb, and I wish you every good fortune in your efforts, and I can't thank you enough, Barry, for coming and agreeing to be with us today. Thanks so much.
John?